Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. It's a pleasure to see you folks here. My name is Dustin Cormier. You can find me on my YouTube channel, How to Rock Astrology. And I'm very excited today to be hanging out with my good friend and fellow astrologer, longtime friend and fellow astrologer, Philip Daniel Miles from Unity Around the Corner and Unifying Perspectives. Thanks for hanging out with me, Philip.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to share this presentation. Very exciting to be a witness.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad every time I get to hang with you, Philip. Now, you've been doing lots of globe trotting. You've been hanging out in South America. You're originally from over in the European era. I believe that would I be right in saying that your original homestead was like Britain?
Yes, I am
Right.
from over there. It's funny to see the different vibrations in
In
different parts of the
consciousness.
world. Yeah,
Totally. The Southern Hemisphere is a different trip, right?
yeah.
So, now Philip, I've gathered you here today because I've been working on a presentation that I've been making, and I've honked on my ram's horn to call upon several of my astrologer friends to talk about this particular the significant consolidation of some things that are happening around our era at present. There's a long-standing trend that I'm going to talk about, and it relates to Neptune and Pluto. Specifically, it's Neptune having conjuncted Pluto in the 1890s. And as well, it also has to do, as we're going to talk about, I'm going to discuss a bit more, but it has to do with Pluto every 250 years in its orbit. It comes closer to the sun than Neptune does. At least that's not quite the right way to say it, but it appears from Earth's perspective that that is the right way to say it. It's just, it looks like Neptune is going slower than Pluto when this happens. And it happens every 250 years. Pluto and Neptune get locked into a sort of lockstep of a sextile. And then Neptune eventually gets released from it as Pluto recedes from being so close to the sun. So this is another trend that I'm going to explain a little bit more with my diagrams. So there's these long-standing trends that are happening in today's time. The last time that Neptune and Pluto came to be conjunct was around the 1400s. And this is the time of the Renaissance, the medieval Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance era. And as well, this is when a lot of big changes happened in the human history and on the history of the planet. In regards to enlightenment, in regards to the human celebration of the divine aspects of our consciousness, trying to be wedded and merged in an alchemical way with the material world. Now, so we're going to talk a little bit about Neptune and Pluto in general. We're going to talk about this Renaissance era. And we're also going to talk about something that I think is also significant. What it is it's something to do with the eclipses in particular, and I'm going to mention it again. I'm just giving everybody a gumball of what's happening. This is another short-term thing that's happening in today's time. It's basically when Pluto comes into Capricorn and Aquarius, and when there is a north and south node eclipse on Pluto in the sign of Capricorn and Aquarius. Whenever Pluto is in these signs, we know that Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn, and it's the material world gatekeeper of materialism, of government ordinance, and it is the shaker and mover of things, of governments, and of everybody's root chakra. In Vedic astrology, we say that Capricorn and Aquarius rule the root chakra. Then Sagittarius and Pisces rule the second chakra. Aries and Scorpio rule the third chakra. Libra and Taurus rule the fourth chakra, the heart chakra. Gemini and Virgo, the speaking, the throat chakra. And then Leo and Cancer rule the sixth chakra. So whenever something's going on in Capricorn and Aquarius, just like how the human being has a difficult time making anything manifest if their root chakra is not securely stabilized in some kind of congruent, constructive foundation. The collective root chakra of the planet goes through a shakeup every time important transits happen in Capricorn and Aquarius. When Pluto visits Capricorn, as it has been in the last, 2 decades, there tends to be a shakeup of the collective root chakra, and this especially is brought into manifestation on eclipse periods. In particular, the north and south nodes hitting Capricorn. That's where Pluto's been. One of the points that I'd like to point out is that in the 2019 era, the late in 2019, the pandemic that we've all been going through and recently facing, there was a south node eclipse in Capricorn at the end of 2019. And we're playing with correlation here, which means, we're saying that this was caused by this, or that there's a correlation of this happening with this. And it's speculation, but us as astrologers, this is part of what we're doing here, is calling a pattern when we see a pattern. It's up to conjecture whether that seems to be the case. But the pattern that I see happening here is that it's during that time that in 2019, the South Node eclipse happened while Pluto was in Capricorn and the global pandemic happened. Now, I'm going to show a few points in history where big, huge, world-changing things happened every time Pluto was in Capricorn or Aquarius, and there was an eclipse that happened around the time of Pluto being in Capricorn. One of the examples I can give, in 1775, that area, the Declaration of Independence was signed in the United States, and the Great American Revolution started, where the American people wanted to separate themselves from Britain. It was in 1775 that America basically, gave the middle finger to mom, to Britain, and decided to be an individual state. And there was a big warring period that started around then. And this happened when Pluto was in Capricorn. And the year 1775, there was a South Node eclipse on Capricorn. So we see a pattern happening then when the American Great Revolutionary War started. It's the same situation of Pluto in the nodes that started the global pandemic. Now, I'm going to show a few examples of this happening. And this short-term thing that's happening, it happened in 2019, and there's going to be another North Node eclipse on Pluto and Aquarius in 2027 and 2028. And I'm going to kind of show this here around this time. I'm going to show this again, but essentially we can see.
This is what I was just thinking about this when you were
showing a little bit of a diagram, right?
Because I was considering how the South Node in Capricorn eclipses.
Yeah.
That is always a release and like a revolution.
Yeah.
Whereas the North Node is more of a clamp down and like insulate the people in some way kind of situation.
Yeah, you're right. It's a funny thing to think of, Philip, because sometimes they can both kind of do both. The South Node relates to liberating ourselves from a karma that has been passed. It's almost like, if somebody's an alcoholic, they have to let go of the old patterns, but they also have to embrace new patterns. This is a reflection of the same thing. When the archetype is funneled into the South Node, it usually means that karma in reality is showing you why the old ways are no longer working, and we suffer. We go through explosions of things being bottled up and bursting because of the South Node saying that this karma does no longer work. With the North Node, it's more about, look at how tasty the opportunity to get out of the past action seems to be. The north node is the signifier of the new path and the reflections of each other. The old path seems boring because the new path is glorifying. The new path is glorifying because the old path isn't working anymore. So the north and south nodes are polar, but just like every polarity in astrology, the polarity is opposite but yet similar. Just like how Capricorn is earth, but it's cardinal, and Cancer is water, but it's also cardinal. There's opposition, but there's also harmonious similarity. So just to give a quick glimpse of what we're going to talk about at the end of this presentation, we can see in 2019 and 2020, this area, there were solar eclipses on the south node in Capricorn. The north node eclipse happened in Cancer in 2019 and 2020. And the south node eclipses occurred in Capricorn, where Pluto was. And this was the start of the pandemic. Now, when we fast forward 2021, 2022, this is this year, which was an important one because the north node solar eclipse happened in April 2022. And this was when Uranus was conjunct Taurus. We see a lot of things happening in technology and resources and things like this. Even the LGBTQ community has really been blistering through, while Uranus has been in the Venus sign, Venus ruled Taurus. And the north node was there at the same time in 2022. So this is the kind of things that happen when the south node and the north node have their eclipses occur while there's an outer planet in the sign. It's not just Pluto where this is significant, but of course, Pluto tends to be the biggest transformer and shaker.
Do you know what I like about these types of significations is that they root back to the origins of astrology. It's like you don't even, I personally, when I'm working with my orbs, I use a very tight orb, but there are certain rules and traditions. Like if you're using a node in sign with another planet, like what you're saying, that signification means that it's going to detonate a certain energy.
Yes. And I would say that this is a both and situation. I am somebody who is trained in Western in my roots, but I've recently been deeply obsessed with Vedic astrology. Western astrology abides by orbs in the way that you're talking about, and this is true. The Plutonian solar eclipse phenomenons are activated in a more deeply clenching way when the nodes in the eclipses are close to Pluto.
Especially these transpersonal planets as well.
For sure. But you're also right in the sense, and I'm a cross-cultural blender here.
I think that's the best way. I think it's most interesting.
For sure. What unified perspective, you know what I'm saying? So the Vedic people insist that it's really all about the dispositor. When two planets, even if one planet is in 1 degree of Scorpio and another planet is at 28 degrees of Scorpio, the Vedic people still call that a conjunction because both of these planets are working through Mars, the dispositor. So that's how they think of it.
And Mars can be in any position, like Mars can be in any bit of the sky. I love dispositors as well, because I think it's the best way to tell a story using the energy filters. Like a watering can, it's pouring the energy in.
You got it. And it almost takes the shape of the watering can, it takes the energy of whatever it's being poured through. That's why the dispositor is important in all astrology aspects. And this is how the Vedic people often think. They're very sign-oriented, very much more sign-oriented than house-oriented at a certain level, at least when it comes to predicting things, because the signs are the ground upon which the houses are fed, if that makes sense. That's how the Vedic people think of it. So as we move along here, we're going to see that, ultimately what happened in 2022, North Node was in Taurus. 2023, it was in Aries. 2025 and 2026, the North Node is going to be in Pisces. And then what we see is in 2027, there's going to be a solar eclipse in Aquarius while Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius. And this is going to happen while all three of the outer planets are in masculine signs. Neptune will be in Aries, Uranus will be in Gemini, and Pluto will be in Aquarius. So the North Node happening right on Pluto is one of the big significations that I want to talk about in this presentation. It's going to be happening in 2027 and in 2028. In fact, in 2028, the North Node is going to be even closer in conjunction to Pluto. So this in itself is a pretty darn big signification. So what I want to do here, because as you know, this already is a pretty revved up thing that we could even talk about in itself. What's going to be happening in 2027, 2028, just because the North Node is on Pluto and Pluto is in Aquarius. Because Aquarius, again, is the gatekeeper of the dance between material and spirit. I often like to tell people the Vedic idea of things is that when you think about it, the chakras go from the bottom to the top. The Vedic people think of the chakras as being related to the signs. Leo is the crown chakra. Leo manifests into Cancer. Leo manifests into Capricorn. Leo and Cancer are the south hemisphere. Leo manifests into Capricorn and creates material manifestation. Capricorn and Aquarius are the root chakra of Earth at the northern hemisphere. And Aquarius is a fixed sign that manifests into spirit. Aquarius, now that Pluto is in Aquarius, the Plutonian energy is coming up the chakras now. Since Leo in the 50s and 60s, Pluto in Leo has been all about manifesting spirit into reality. Now, as Pluto comes into Aquarius, we're coming up from the root chakra and leading towards spiritual manifestation. And this is a natural part of Pluto's cycle, but it's very significant because, again, Saturn is the material gatekeeper that lays the foundation for what's going to be happening in the next 250 years of the Pluto cycle. Now, that's just Pluto cycles. Go ahead.
I just kind of got from listening to you, I just got this imagery or feeling or focus of the energy of the Pluto in Aquarius, that cycle, the Pluto in Leo, that cycle, this past half of the zodiac.
Yep, you got it.
Been more about consuming. And this is because it's the shadow of Leo. And now, which is really create, which is opposite of consumption. But now Pluto coming into Aquarius, it's more now we've learned the lessons of the shadow and we embark on using the shadow, which is actually the most fertile bit for creation. So it's not about ingestion, it's more about expression of
very good
ourselves.
Very good, Philip. Very good. That's spiritual expression, as opposed to when Pluto's in Leo, it tends to be we had lots of rock stars in Pluto and Leo. The whole world was all about celebrity in a strong way. Now that Pluto's in Aquarius, there's probably, in my estimation, going to be an insistence, just as we've noticed that Instagram, I'm a musician, and lots of people and musicians are crying about the fact that there's no more rock stars anymore. There's no more big celebrities these days. It's hard to be a musician. It's hard to get the backing of the industry because everyone is going on Instagram and can be their own rock star. You can put on the right clothing, you can put out the right smile, the right vibe, and you can be, each individual person has the power to be a rock star, and they don't even have to put money into it. They just have to put the right content out. Lots of people are complaining about this, but I would say that this is part of what we're talking about. It's Pluto being in Aquarius. Now, it's not so much about making an industry, Leo to Capricorn. It's not so much about making an industry where certain people can be rock stars for the industry. The industry is taking a back seat to the pleasure and individuation of the individual creator, of everybody, which is a tricky place to deal with because it's a funny thing. It's just, when everyone's a star, you get light pollution. Who's a star anymore? It's a very psychedelic thing to think about.
It's very funny because I'm thinking again at the time frame of like the Pluto and the Leo and their creations, like the plateau of the stage, the Hollywood, and
You got
yet
it.
there's only they had the cameras to film the stars
Right.
in the glamorous state that they would look. But now they gave us their toys.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Whether they liked it or not. Now it's a tricky thing because when power is given to the hands of the many, as it often is when anything Aquarian happens, there is a topple down. There's less of the hierarchical power. And that's funny because I'm a reflector in human design. I think it's one of the rare ones that it's hard to find.
You're the
And
first person that I've met, like, since I understood what that is.
right, that's so cool. I love telling people that because it feels special or whatever. The
That's
Leo
cool.
in
I
me
will
likes to
tell
feel special.
I'll tell my friends at the Human Design Group.
Sure, sure. I'd love that because I want to get more into it. I'm not that far into it, but I know that I am this. And the reason I bring it up is because I tend to be the A to everyone. I'm always playing devil's advocate. And everybody hates Saturn. Everybody hates Capricorn. Everyone thinks of his dad, this annoying thing of patriarchy at some level. And of course, patriarchy has it's done enough. This whole hierarchical, patriarchal, linear narrative of paternal lineage, of certain fat cats like JP Morgan and the Rockefellers holding all the money to themselves while all the other people starve. That is being deteriorated with these Aquarian vibrations that are being radiated in today's time. This is the light worker narrative. This is everybody gaining the power of the individual. Now, I always like to see the yin to the yang. And while it is awesome that the power is being put into the hands of the individuals, this light pollution phenomenon, I think, this is me being a reflector who's bugging people, probably. There's bound to still be a lack of hierarchical, patriarchal, systemic infrastructure, which has been the operative modem for a long time. And I don't think it's ever going to fully leave. But it would be nice if it was taken out of the hands that it's been in. But there are certain places in the world that are not going to let that really happen, including the governing bodies, including the people who have had all the money all this time. History has a hard time letting go. Pluto is going to make some changes with regards to this, and so is the cycles of Neptune. And we're going to see how this plays out, because ultimately, these patriarchal structures, I think that there is still something positive that can come from having infrastructures of a positive sort. Because I've been in a band, I've been in a musical band where if you have 4 people in a band and everybody wants to do different things, it's too many cooks in the kitchen, too many chiefs and not enough too many chiefs and not enough workers, as the phrase often goes, right? When there's too many chiefs and not enough humble workers, then everybody has the choice to say that I don't like how things are going, and then production stops. So this is one of the funny antagonizing things that I'd like to make people think about. How are we going to see a positive use of patriarchal power structures in the coming future, knowing that that is the nature of Capricorn? Pluto's coming into Aquarius. We could be possibly coming into this age of Aquarius, whatever that exactly means. And also Saturn and Jupiter conjunction just happened in Aquarius as well, which many people are saying are signifying Jupiter's spiritual intent being manifested in Saturn's materium through Aquarius. And in the last 200 years, it was in Capricorn. So there's another Aquarian element happening here. And while all this is occurring, Capricorn is still a part of the zodiac. And every piece of the zodiac is important, including Capricorn, including the buildup of patriarchal structures where anybody who is willing to put in the work to be well regarded for their effort ought to still be and to still have something to reflect on the effort that they've put in. This is the classic communist versus socialist, or socialist versus capitalism thing. So there's lots to be talked about here, but for now, in this presentation, we've given a little bit of a backdrop on what we want to talk about here. Now, Philip, what do you think about me? I've got a little presentation that I've prepared for us here. What do you think about me unfolding it and kind of showing a little bit of what I've been talking about with the Pluto and Neptune cycles and with what's going to be coming in 2026, 2027 era? You want to
Yeah,
start unfolding it?
sounds great. Sounds
All right,
very intriguing.
cool. Okay, Philip. So I'm going to start rocking and rolling here. So, I've already talked with you about a lot of the things that are happening, Philip. We're going to be speaking to specific long transits that have been occurring over centuries of time. It's a long-term trend. We also have short-term trends that are happening in today's time that are overlapping with these long-term trends, specifically in the coming time of 2025 to 2028. One of the things happening in this time is the kite formation of the three outer planets coming into masculine signs in tight angles. As well, we're going to talk about the eclipses of the North and South node to the planet Pluto when it's in the sign of Capricorn and Aquarius. So the theme of, Neptune relates to religion, ethics, and spirituality. Pluto relates to government, corporate power, and bureaucracy. And the clashing of these two abounds when there's a dialogue between Pluto and Neptune. We can see the interplay between these archetypes of the human collective by observing the cycle of Neptune, passing Pluto. This happened in 1890 at the start of the common, the 1900s were such a new consciousness, such a new era that was really different from everything that came before. And in Neptune came past Pluto in 1890. So we're feeling reverberations from that, as I'm going to show. Now, these are big generational changes that doesn't always manifest as, we can't correlate everything to Pluto and Neptune, but the gate through which Plutonian transformation occurs in the collective world infrastructures and framework is through eclipses on Pluto in Capricorn and Aquarius. This is what I insist on, particularly because, again, like I said, Pluto in Capricorn and Aquarius does represent a cycle in Pluto's cycle where the paint is wet on the material framework of government and governing agencies, because this is the world of Saturn, the world of counting, the world of the red root chakra, where everything needs to be manifested. You can only do anything in this world if you have energy coming from your physical body. If your physical body doesn't have the energy, doesn't matter how badly you want to get up and be emotional, or to spit fire, or to blend at the heart chakra, or speak, or make it to any engagement, you have to have the red chakra. You got to be able to get on the plane and go and see the thing. That's why the Saturn is so important. And that's why Pluto in Saturn ruled signs is such a signifier for the paint melting, the steel beams of the material framework being wet, so that we can create the reality that we want as a collective. So now, do you have anything to say about everything that I kind of just went through there, Philip? This is a little introduction to what we're going to be talking about. So
what we're looking at is this period where we are halfway through. We're coming to this halfway through point of the reworkings of our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we're realizing this as Pluto is culminating in Capricorn, moving into Aquarius.
You got it.
Still got a lot of
consolidating.
Yeah, but also a lot of opportunity to utilize the awareness that we're conducting here.
That's right.
We're actually getting the sculptor's mitt on, if you will.
That's right.
We're actually gaining the opportunity to see that we've got a responsibility in playing the role of change.
Beautiful, Philip. And you and I talked about this before. It's very important for people to consider that us as astrologers, but all spiritual light worker type people in general have to consider, that we're playing a bit of a Pied Piper role by bringing people to awareness of the paint being wet, where everybody has the chance to paint the collective picture that is manifesting. And it's important for people to be aware that the corporate elite interests that have always been in power are aware that the paintbrush is being handed to the collective in times of transformation like this. So they're aware of it, and they're playing the Pied Piper game too. So it's important for people to be discerning about where they get their information and about the type of information that they're digesting, and to keep their eyes open to the fact that we're in this transformative time, because the elite people are also aware that this is a transformative time.
It's in the frequency of authenticity where it's really witnessed to be true.
Right, no kidding. So how about I keep plowing through here, Philip? Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about is what is the difference between Pluto and Neptune? Essentially, we're going to discuss 3 different trends. These are the long-term trends that I've been talking about, trend number 1 and trend number 2. And then trend number 3 is more of a short-term trend that happens, basically whenever Pluto is in Capricorn and Aquarius. So trend number 1 is when Neptune laps Pluto. And we can just see this happening. This is 1840. Neptune was in the 11th from Pluto. In 1870, Neptune was in the 12th from Pluto. In 1882, Neptune came to be in the same sign as Pluto. And then in 1891, Neptune conjuncts Pluto in Gemini. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Then in 1915, Neptune was in the 2nd from Pluto. By 1954, Neptune was pretty much exactly sextile Pluto. And then we're going to talk about how these two got stuck because Pluto came into the same orbit as Neptune. And then there was a long period where these two were in a sextile before they finally, in 2026, they're finally leaving that sextile. But this goes to show that in the 1891, Neptune lapped Pluto. And this hasn't happened for 500, 600 years, right? So Neptune lapping Pluto is one of the big long trends that we're trying to dig into here. Now here's trend number 2. Pluto coming closer to the sun than Neptune. This happens every 248 years because, of course, this is a Pluto phenomenon. Pluto's part of Pluto's cycle, because of course Pluto has a 250-year cycle, 248 years. Every time Pluto gets to a certain part of its cycle, it's particularly when Pluto transits from approximately the end of Libra to the beginning of Sagittarius. What happens is, as we can see here, this is Pluto's unusual orbit. It's a 3-dimensional phenomenon more than any other planet. We can see that all these other planets follow a basically 2-dimensional orbit around the sun, except for Pluto. Pluto's does this. If you can see what I'm looking at here, Philip, do you understand the diagram that I'm kind of showing here?
The very elliptical egg shape.
Yes, you got it. You got it. So I'm just going to quickly show my screen here just to kind of convey it, right? All the other orbits are going this way. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, Mars. They're all like this. Pluto does this. It's at an angle, right? So everyone else is spinning 2-dimensionally. Pluto's has this angle to it. And this is part of what is causing Pluto to have this dimension where Pluto's orbit comes closer to the sun. It's not only that, but just in general, the egg shape of Pluto has some points where, like, everything else is a pretty perfect circle around the sun. Pluto occasionally dips closer to the sun than Neptune. So it's sort of a two-way phenomenon that kind of happens there. Lots of astrologers talk about when Pluto is going higher up, there's something that kind of happens then, and then when it comes down, it's a different sort of thing. Pluto is coming out of the underworld every 250 years. When you split Pluto in half, for 125 years, it's above the elliptical, and then 125 years, it's below the elliptical. Now, astronomy is not my strong suit, but I did want to bring this to people's attention. And more to the point for our conversation, what I want to get at is when Pluto is closer to the sun than Neptune is. When that happens, there is an effect on Pluto and Neptune. Neptune there's kind of like a tension that's built for the whole time that Pluto is in Neptune's orbit. So this is a long period. Usually it's about like 50 years. It could even be considered to be longer than that. Technically, it's only 20 years where Neptune appears from Earth's perspective. It looks like Neptune is going slower than Pluto. And it's because Pluto is closer to the sun than Neptune is. It looks like Pluto is going faster than Neptune. And I'm going to explain what exactly that means. But essentially what it means is, when we see here, we noticed in 1954, Neptune came exactly sextile Pluto. It was right in this moment that Pluto entered the space of being closer to the sun. That's why all of a sudden from 1954, we see 1958, they changed signs to the next signs. 1972, they changed to the next signs. 1985, they changed to the next signs. 1999, they changed to the next sign. But they stayed in the sextile for basically 50 years, right? It's now the whole time that it's going through the sextile, what is actually happening is that from Earth's perspective, Pluto appears to be moving faster. So let's say in 1954, like we said, there's an exact sextile. Neptune is 60 degrees ahead of Pluto. 2 signs exactly. Let's say if Pluto was at 8 degrees Leo, Neptune was at 8 degrees Libra, right? It's an exact sextile. Now, as we go up to 1972, let's say if Pluto was in Libra at 8 degrees of Libra in 1972, Neptune was at 0 degrees of Sagittarius. Neptune came slower. Pluto has progressed farther in the zodiac than Neptune has. Pluto is now at 8 degrees Libra. Neptune is at 0 degrees Sagittarius. So this happened where Neptune was in a retrograde compared to the speed of Pluto. And this happened for basically, it started in 1954 and it technically ended around like 1999, 2005. Now, it was in this time that Neptune started moving faster than Pluto again, because Pluto came out of orbit from the sun. Pluto started going back down into the underworld, essentially. Or actually, rather, at this time, what would have happened is that it would have came to the upswing. I've got to check my astronomy on that. But essentially, Pluto is now not as close to the sun. Now Neptune is moving faster. By 2012, Neptune is starting to catch up. And by 2026, just around our time period that we're talking about, Neptune is once again caught up, where in 2026, Pluto is at 1 degree Aquarius, whatever it is, and Neptune is at 1 degree of Aries. Now they're caught up. And now Neptune is going to start bursting through the gate and start going faster than it usually does. So this is trend number 2, right? Trend number 1 was the Neptune lapping Pluto every 500, 600 years. Trend number 2 is when Pluto comes closer to the sun than Neptune is. Very significant things happen when both of these happen at the same time, just like it did, as we're going to talk about. This same phenomenon of both of these happening at the same time occurred in the 1400s and in the 1500s during the Enlightenment of the Renaissance era, the Italian Renaissance, and all of the things where Von Goethe was doing his thing, playing with light and prisms and discovering light. Don't quote me on that because I think von Goethe might have been a bit later. But Columbus sailed to America. Copernicus discovered that Earth is going around the sun, and the church and the state became separate in a way that it never has before. This happened in the 1400s because both of these trends were occurring at the same time.
That's big, isn't it? That's a big period as well for when they were changing the way that language was used across the continents of the world.
Right.
And even the way that enunciating was done. And as this is the throat chakra, and it's a very big part of our creation of the world.
Totally.
So,
totally.
Like, when you see the separation of church and state, these types of things, it mirrors the breaking of the language or the chakra or the heart in a way of the people.
For sure. And especially because, you know, Pluto and Neptune, they're their own. I wouldn't necessarily correlate them with any chakras. So when these two have things going between them, all of the chakras go through phase changes, which means what you're saying is correct. When Pluto and Neptune are having dialogues between each other, it's almost like the chakras beyond the typical energy field are intermingling with each other. Right?
Yeah, like the central nervous system and the synapses of the brain.
Right. Right. Whatever, you know, like the mystical aspects of the whole human psychocerebral complex are going through some interchange. And it has to do with Neptune and Pluto. You know, we'd really want to talk about where those two are at in order to get a feeling for what's happening when Neptune passes over Pluto. Now, before I get into that, as I said, the third trend I want to show quickly is simply.
May I ask for a quick bathroom break here?
Yes, of course you can, my friend. You feel free, and I'll hang out for you here for just a minute, and maybe I'll pause our video, and then we'll come right back to it. Okay.
Okay.
Sweet. Okay, so we've just done our quick bathroom break. Now we're getting right back to it. I believe the final point that I want to make is trend 3 here. We've talked about the long-standing archetypes that are happening between Pluto and Neptune in particular. And trend 3 is when the south and north node eclipse happens on Pluto in Capricorn or Aquarius, because both of these signs are ruled by the gatekeeper of material world affairs, Saturn. Saturn being the final planet from the solar system that relates to the signs of the zodiac, at least from the Vedic perspective. There are people who say that Uranus relates to Aquarius, that Pluto relates to Scorpio, and that Neptune relates with Pisces. These are things that, I mean, I'm not going to deny that they're a possibility, but I have questioned it since I've become a Vedic astrologer. Not to say that it's not possible, but it's neither here nor there. The point is that the Vedic people don't think about them that way. They think about them, the Neo-Vedic community thinks about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as arbiters of a chakra. It's almost like the 7th chakra, which has less to do with the 6 chakras that relate to the signs that I've already described.
Yeah, in my practice, in describing transits and the experience of planets, I much rather use Mars as a ruler of Aries and Scorpio, and Saturn as Capricorn and Aquarius.
Cool.
Because it fits the template and the motif perfectly.
Yes. Cool. That's awesome. I'm glad you're on that same page, Philip. But for anybody watching, it's not something that we're challenging here. I just like to let everybody know where I'm at. In terms of what I feel pulled to, but it's not something that I'm hard about. I'm very open to where that's at. So I think, Philip, it is time for us to start moving through our presentation here, at least this next bit of it. So the first bit that I'd like to convey here, I just want to make sure that we're still recording. I think we are. Yes, we are. Thank you. Okay. Now we see here, we've just kind of shown this, and I'm going to kind of rock and roll through it again. 1840, Neptune was in the 11th. 1870, Neptune was in the 12th. 1882, Neptune was within 10 degrees of the orb of Pluto. Now, there are people born at this time that reflect the rippling of Neptune coming close to Pluto and the world changes that are happening at this time. I've written down just a few. Aleister Crowley and Carl Jung were both born in 1875, and this was when Pluto was in late Taurus and Neptune was in early Taurus. It's not technically a close orb, but they were still in the same sign. And Aleister Crowley was a huge world changer. So is Carl Jung, and so is Ramana Maharshi. Now, in 1891, Neptune actually conjuncted Pluto in the sign of Gemini. For everybody who's watching, we have to understand that this isn't always going to convey a positive energy. It's going to convey certainly a change in the landscape and the dialogue between governmental power structures of Pluto and the individual liberty of spirit, as in Neptune. We can really see a gross example of these two planets coming together at their worst through the figure of Hitler. Hitler was the Plutonian archetype of trying to hold and control systems of power, but he was also a Neptune archetype. And again, these two planets are neither good or bad. They are amplifiers. And Hitler was somebody who obviously took the agency of these planets and transmitted them through a negative karma. Neptune, Hitler did a lot of really weird things. Like he tried to make a singular race, the Aryan race, to be the people who would have the most spiritual divine correlations. And he was playing with genes and genetics and weird stuff that he wanted the liberty to do. He even wanted the liberty to do what he did to people in those camps. This is a libertine thing that he wanted, but his liberty was the repression of millions. So this is the kind of messed up themes that Pluto and Neptune, especially together, can kind of convey.
Yeah, I agree that even the pictures painted about these individuals, they could be one of, well, who's painting the picture of these individuals? And that can be said for each one of them. What I mean is, like, it was media that said Hitler was the campaigner for the things that he was the campaigner from. But that's taking the word of the media, is that they're using a glossy varnish with their words and deception. The same could be said for Aldous Huxley with his work. Like they could say, because like they could say that was a deceiver, but it's clear for our eyes now that this person had some kind of inside channel or information that was being shared.
Right.
And with these idealist gurus, same things.
For sure. And I often say
it's Gemini too, isn't it? So it's like, two things.
Right. Very good. Totally. I often say that the world of spiritual power is morally ambiguous. And that doesn't mean that the actions portrayed don't have moral realities. But spiritual power is just pure, they often say the path to evil is paved with good intentions. And I'm sure Hitler thought that Hitler thought he had good intentions. So this is the tricky nature, especially of these two coming together. But it does come with positivity. For example, I myself am very into Paramahansa Yogananda. And, I've been getting into Vedic consciousness. I think it's a very important thing for people of the world to be getting into. I think yoga is something that is important as a spiritual science and the science of self-realization, which permeates beyond just the culture of India. I think that every mystic of every culture and every religious spiritual advocate has been dealing with the world of having surrender to the divinity inside themselves, finding some kind of faith in the power of the transcendental force of evolution that is coming through their material frame, their genes, their society, and themselves. The people who are saying that they have faith in God are really what they're doing is, this is a phrase I often like to say. To say you have faith in God means that you have humbled yourself before the nature of evolution, of which you are a small part of the bigger picture of. Having faith in God means being humbled by the nature of evolution. And this evolution of society, according to those who are, I guess I have atheistic tendencies, again, I'm a reflector. Amongst atheists, I often come off as a religious person, but amongst religious people, I often come off as atheistic. This is just my nature, and I try to be in both camps. But I am ultimately somebody who has felt and believes that there is some kind of intelligent a design. Not to say that someone designed it, but there is some kind of design. Nobody designed a flower that has the Fibonacci sequence in it, but the design of the Fibonacci sequence is in it.
That's the confirmation when you said that for me, because for something you said about a while back,
right?
When you were talking about the pattern of something, because
mm-hmm.
the definition of pattern is actually design.
Nice. That's a great way to put that, Philip.
And so the geometry is something that we've designed, but we forget because it's all immersing. It's like hypnotic and beautiful and time, and it's so glamorous, and like even the love and the sorrow and the depth of everything is just so perfect.
Part of what has to happen in order for the truth of that morally ambiguous power of pure awareness and pure nature to come through. It's a difficult thing to talk about, but we have to move through it. We have to be willing to plunge into the unknown in order to see what transcends our present conception of human reality.
Well, it does start to break down when we go into these forms of expression, because it so suddenly becomes poetry, and the paint which is wet, as you say, it makes the words almost drunk and slurry, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting, very Neptunian sort of thought there for sure. So what we see happening here, Yogananda is somebody who I would paint as being somebody who's like literally the opposite of Hitler because he made such big world changes in the world of yoga and Kriya yoga, and I'm really a fan of him. But there's also a guy, Swami Prabhupada, Bhaktinanda Prabhupada, who put out versions of the Srimad Bhagavatam and a bunch of other Vedic texts that I think are tuning people into this idea that the world of Vedanta and Sanskrit and a lot of the things that we take sacred in the yogic sciences of self-realization are a science of the eternal spirit and divinity in us all that goes beyond any religion and any culture. Krishnamacharya is also somebody who was the teacher of BKS Iyengar as well as Patapi Juas and a few other people. So Krishnamacharya was born around this time as well. This is the coming of the science of spirit. The science, Pluto, and Pluto really is not necessarily an arbiter of science. Neptune can be this arbiter of science. It's trading off between science and spirit. Where Pluto comes in is how much the state government ordinances have been tied to spiritual beliefs. When spirituality becomes scientific, Pluto, and it involves Pluto, government power structures are going to transform. Yoga means the power is being put in the people's hands in a lot of ways. And this is one of the reasons why I signify as Pluto and Neptune coming together, being connected to these figures.
Yeah, I was thinking just for a moment there.
For sure.
About what these two together might mean for the Gemini energy. And it's like, well, Mercury is obviously always flittering. It's going to do so many circuits in the time that those two are in its sign. But it's a bit like releasing riddles onto people, or releasing a literature, or releasing, as I said, the language change, or something like something which is like, well, this will tie them in knots in the mind. Not tie them like we are victim to something, but like I'm saying, like by design, these riddles are something for us to which put you under contraction of the mind, end up multiplying your awareness. You end up expanding through the compression.
Right.
That's the whole
it's very
ethos
Gemini.
of the whole space and time thing.
For sure. And really, you know, Pluto and Neptune only come together every 600 years. And in the last cycle, as we're going to see, it was also in Gemini.
So this is the inception of something bigger than the actual, we're under the conjunction.
Yeah.
This is the inception of a 600-year cycle, which we are within.
Yes, right. And even the 600-year cycle happens in Gemini. It happened in Gemini in the 1400s.
You could say it's like, excuse me, that it's the casting of the spell, like you could say, like these two coming together.
For sure, yeah, especially because it's in Gemini. Now, who knows, in the next 600 years, maybe it will finally move over to Cancer, and who knows what the implications are of that. It's something interesting to think about, but you know, this is something that's conjecture. Really, you and I, Philip, like a lot of the natal stuff that I do a lot of natal astrology on my channel, and I know you do too. When we're talking about collective, bigger picture outer planet transits, there's a lot of work that hasn't been done yet. And right now, what we're doing is giving people food for thought for astrologers and researchers of the future to consider. Now, for now, let's stick to our ball that we have rolling. So ultimately, in 1891, there were some big people born here and big changes in the world. You know, India at this time started to come into its independence from Britain. Gandhi was born in the era just before here. It was around 1870 that Gandhi was born. And this is when British independence started to be, Indian independence started to be a big theme. As you can see, I'm obsessed with India and Vedic, so maybe my bias is there, but I still think that's significant. India being the cradle of so much spirituality in society, in our world.
Yes, just to touch briefly, like
for sure.
on that mention, like when we're talking about Britannia actually going over and seizing a lot of land and under the flag, if you will, like it went to India. It wasn't known as India then,
right?
But it stole the tea and the astrology, and it kept the tea and the astrology, and it sold the birth tea to the people, and enslaved everybody else, and just didn't share the astrology at all. And so basically,
that's a great example, Philip, of the passing of hands of Pluto and Neptune. Really, Pluto, as Britain came in with the guise of Neptune, telling the Indian people that we are going to merge and it's going to be a good thing for everybody. And Britain got to keep all the wisdom of Neptune and left India destitute through its Plutonian power.
Yeah, and exactly the same thing was happening over here in the Marin Riviera, with which was the peso was equal to the dollar.
Right.
And they did the same thing, fleeced them with paper money, and then they did it to America as well, but under the constitutional right.
Yeah, and the gold standard being torn off. You know, it's interesting that
that's what we're seeing now with the Pluto return.
Like, right, for sure. And I think that it was right around the time that, you know, right around this time, actually, it was 1907, that there was a little bit of a problem in the States, and Neptune was in the second sign from Pluto, which kind of relates to resources. And it was around 1907 that the famous meeting happened on Jekyll Island, where the instigators of American commerce developed the Federal Reserve, which took America off the gold standard. So, you know, what we're dealing with is important cycles as relates to our present time, for better or worse. You know,
what was that island that you mentioned? So is this something in the Canaan Islands, which has got Cancer rules as well?
Well, it was at Jekyll Island, which is close to New York, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
still very interesting, because it's obviously deception about how to play the mother. role for the people in a way with the economy.
Something very interesting. That's something to tie that into what we have going on here would be an interesting conversation. Because I really see there being resonances between the elites and all these sorts of things that are happening in today's time, the Rockefellers and Roosevelts, and the fact that these guys really came. One of the guys I had in here, I believe it was around 1870 or 1892, that J.P. Morgan Jr. was born.
I feel like, just to say something about these kind of oligarchs, in a sense, like from a zoomed up perspective, I feel I've kind of starting to try the best. I can oscillate, because you got to zoom in, and you got to fight for the people and for the rights and for ourselves. But you zoom out, and then you can see, okay, I have compassion for oligarchs, because they're actually reflecting the keys which we are to adorn. How we're to support ourselves in taking responsibility as creators of our world, because we may not do it the same way, but they're reflecting how the abstinence and how it's done in a way.
Yeah, and it's kind of a freaky thing, you know. It's kind of like we're kids in today's time. If we decide that we want to say, forget you, mom and dad, we want to go out and live on our own, mom and dad, the Rockefellers think, you know, or these oligarchs have always thought that they're helping us by leading and being the power structure. And we are coming into the discovery that we can be sovereign. And by doing that, we have to take up the responsibility of being collectively sovereign, and whatever that means. So that's the kind of narrative that's happening in today's time.
Well, I see it's like you have to form your own society, like what they have. And we're living in their society, which will mean that we're subjects and of it.
Right, right.
Which is not empowered to our own. That's falling short.
I see what you mean. I often use a metaphor. You can't break out of a system through the system. It's like trying to wash dirt off with more dirt. You have to have soap in order to wash off the dirt. And us creating our own system of sovereignty might be that sort of soap.
Yeah, and it doesn't. What I'm starting to also recognize, which is a powerful thing, is that actually it doesn't have to be a geographical thing. It's like, oh, where are we going to go?
Right.
It's that we can do it in a way which is like instating like ourselves as, for instance, just for argument's sake, as astrologers.
Right.
And that can be a society of astrologers, and astrology can be for everyone. It doesn't have to be a class.
Right. Well, this is what's happening in today's time too, is that everyone is groups. You know, these groups are no longer by nation, because everyone is connected to the information network. So what nation you're in is not as important as the groups that you abide by.
And that's Aquarius, and it means also that you don't have to be stuck. Well, I'm in this group, so you can still disconnect from, like an amoeba, from that group. Well, I'm in this group for a few hours of the day, but only for a few days of the week. You know, I've got other groups that I'm intermingling with, and you rub shoulders with all different types of people, and that's an alchemical recipe for all kinds of things.
For sure, for sure. You know, something I often say is that in the age of Aquarius, all people can blend and still be what they are. It's a very important phrase for the age of Aquarius, right?
Yeah. Authenticity is, because that's not, again, that's no conforming to someone else's idea of what has to be the template or the pattern.
You know, it's interesting, tricky things to talk about these days, but it's important that we're making this conversation, Philip. That's why I wanted to have you on here today.
Thank you.
So, shall we dig a little bit further? I want to start digging into these looming archetypal phenomenons that are happening with these trends. So, what we see happening, Neptune. So this first trend we've noticed is Neptune passing Pluto. This happened recently, and it is signifying big, important things. In 1915, Neptune was in the second sign from Pluto. It's 30 degrees apart. Now, in 1954, I already gave this short thrift, but I'm just going to drill through it here. Neptune was exactly sextile Pluto, and this is when trend number 2 started, right? Pluto coming closer to the sun than Neptune. This right here is when Pluto entered the orbit of Neptune, and these two became lockstep, where for this much time, neither of them really moved far from the distance from each other. And it's interesting that this happened, by the way, just in the area of the 1960s. I myself consider myself still to be a hippie. And I am aware, as many people are, that there was very big, important consciousness revolutions that happened in the 1960s.
My
And
mother was born with this sextile as well.
right, no kidding.
She's born in 52, so she's got Pluto in Leo and she's got Neptune in Libra.
No kidding. So she was in this area of time where things were revving up to this revolutionary sort of consciousness. So 1954, the sextile started, and they came into sextile from each other. By 1958, they were in the next signs over. By 1972, they were in the next signs over, still sextile. And in fact, Pluto appeared to be going a bit faster from Earth's perspective than Neptune. 1985, Pluto is in Scorpio, Neptune's in Capricorn. 1999, Pluto's in Sagittarius, Neptune is in Aquarius. 2012, Pluto is in Capricorn and Neptune is in Pisces. Now, by around this time, basically by around 2005, Pluto starts going away from the sun in its orbit, which means that Neptune is now closer to the sun, which means now Neptune starts going faster than Pluto. So let's say in about 2012, Pluto was probably in the early parts of Capricorn. Let's say Pluto is about 5 degrees Capricorn. Neptune now is starting to catch up to its sextile. So let's say in 2012, Pluto was around 5 degrees Capricorn. Neptune was around 0, 1, 2 degrees of Pisces. And then by 2026, they're exactly 60 degrees apart. Pluto is at 1 degree of Aquarius. Neptune is at 1 degree of Aries. Now from here, Neptune is going to go even farther. I don't have it here, but as the years go on, Neptune is going to eventually square Pluto, and then it's going to be trine Pluto, and then it's going to be opposite Pluto, and then it's going to start to come around again. But that'll be many years ahead of this present moment. But it is significant that what was started in the 1960s as this sort of sextile from Pluto, and Pluto coming into the part of its cycle where it's closer to the sun. This is just ending just at the same time that Uranus is entering Gemini, while Neptune is in Aries and Pluto is in Aquarius. And this is all happening at the same time that Pluto is in Aquarius.
Well, I feel, yeah, like, so I know that there's more to move on to, but I think this is the time to mention,
sure,
on the tip of my tongue, with regards to this intrigue. So
sure.
Also, well, the chart's there as well.
Yep.
Neptune at the beginning of Aries is a bit of a tease at first, because Neptune goes in and then it goes back to Pisces and then it comes in, and
right.
Saturn's doing the same thing as well. So
yeah,
there's a new story with those two at that time.
mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is that this aspect is also got some other sounds going on, like with the Uranus going into to Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
But these are astrological pickups on new things, and so
totally.
So this is an opening, or as well as a closing. We're closing the portal since the 60s, if you will.
Yes, yeah.
But we're also opening up to this new thing.
I would say it's an opening for sure. In fact, the 60s, there was a lot of repression for the opening that was trying to happen in the 60s.
So it's almost like the opening started to happen, and then it waned, and then it opens again properly at this point.
At this point, you got it.
Also, there is many predictions about this time, even within the I'm no expert, but like even within the foundational philosophy of the person who designed the human design, has predicted to say that in this year 2026 that there'll be a new type of babies being born called the rave babies. And this is like the consciousness is different, a bit like autism in a way,
right?
In the manner that these guys, it's not known how it will be, whether it's telepathic or telekinesis kind of style stuff, but they work together in a manner which is more like a group of cells, like an amoeba, which is kind of what we practice in a way, but we're kind of dumb to it because we're so programmed and heavy with our with our, physical world and our
For sure.
individualism.
In our individualism. Yeah, because each of us thinks in such an individualized way, which is an important thing, but that group consciousness is also important too. And the transition from an individuation into that group consciousness through human design that that person is talking about is always going to be a transition, especially because if they're being born at 2026, they have to deal with the generations before them who thought in this individualistic way.
Well, you saying that made me think, well, it'd be interesting to see what year he was born, and then bringing that back to the sextile, because he might have been born around the opening of it.
He could be, yeah.
But also bringing it back to the group and the individualization. We're talking about Pluto in Aquarius and Neptune in the sign of the individual Aries.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Yep, that's an interesting, very interesting point, Philip. You know, Aquarius is such a sign of collectivism, and Aries is such a sign of individuation. So these are all themes that we've got to consider with the what I would call the short-term trends of what's happening in today's time. You know, this video, I've been intending to make this series all about the long term, and then showing now how we can talk about the short-term stuff within these, within, you know, the long-term thing of, for example, Pluto and Neptune coming conjunct every 600 years. In the short term, there's a lot to talk about just with Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Aries.
Yeah, especially when you consider, like, okay, so they came together when the Aleister Crowley was around not too long ago.
Yeah.
In the 1900s, the late 1900s, and so we're having
the 1800s there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a sextile now, opening sextile. When you consider a lunar cycle, well, the call to action for me is like you might start putting things together with the opening crescent, which is where we're at. But the call to action is not the opening square, really. That's like when you're like, we're doing it, we're off to the, there's no umming and ahhing about it by the opening square. That's a little way off yet, but we have got the concoction coming together. We're starting, the heads have been beyond scratching now. We've got our utensils out, we're doing things. Coming together, it's materializing in some way, or spiritualizing, you could say.
For sure. And there's a lot to think about there, you know, in terms of like how what that cycle represents. And of course, by the time Pluto and Neptune square, they're going to be in different signs. So maybe that could be something that we deal with eventually in somewhere along the line of our exploring. So before we get too much into the individuality of Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Aries, what do you say that we try to finish the long-term trend that we're looking at here? So first thing, what we've been talking about, as we can see, is Neptune coming to conjunct Pluto. The second trend, that was the first trend. This happens every 500, 600 years. Now, the second trend is when Pluto is in the sign of around Virgo, it goes through the sextile with Neptune. And then, or sorry, not the sextile, but what I mean to say is that when Pluto gets into Virgo, Pluto comes closer to the sun than Neptune, which means that they stay in a lockstep for about like 40, 50 years. Now, this is trend number 2. And we can see this is the same diagram as to why this is happening. Now, it's relevant to note that this trend number 2, where Pluto comes closer to the sun than Neptune, this occurred around the time of the American Great Revolution. And this is one of the reasons why I think this trend is important. But it's important also to say that during the American Great Revolution in the late 1700s, trend number 1 was not apparent. In the late 1700s, Neptune was in the 8th or 9th house from Pluto in a balsamic trine. It wasn't conjuncting Pluto. But in the 1500s Renaissance era, both trend number 1 and trend number 2 were occurring. And this is what I mean, the significance of this time. We can see Neptune comes up to Pluto again by 1387, 1399. It happens, the conjunction happened again in the sign of Gemini. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but Neptune comes up again. And of course, just as soon as Pluto is around the area of Leo or Virgo, Pluto comes closer to the sun than Neptune in 1453, right? And of course, this is what I'm building all this up to, is that at this time, this is like the 60s that we just experienced. And at the end of this 60s period, of course, by 1493, Pluto was in Scorpio, Neptune was in Capricorn, and Columbus enters the New World. This is a huge thing for what was going on in the planet at the time. And we could see the bubbling that was going on at this time reflects the 1960s.
Isn't that a reinstatement of a certain type of history as well? Columbus enters the New World. Columbus writes the New World. There is a new map. There is a new cosmology. There is a new currency. There's a new time.
Right, for sure. It's just a whole different chapter in human consciousness. So this is why it's significant that in the 1500s, the 1500s had the conjunction of Pluto to Neptune. This is actually the early 1400s. And then the 1400s era poured into this trend number 2, which is Pluto being closer to the sun than Neptune. And then it was in the 1500s that the world felt the repercussions of this. Now, if we could translate this to being similar to our era, 1521 is almost like 2012. And then 1535 is almost the same, basically, as 2026. And we're going to see that some big changes happened around this time in history of the 1400s. But first, we're going to go back a little bit here. So, again, just to bring home the point, this is the last time before the 1800s. This is about, almost, 500 years prior to that. In 1350, Neptune was in the 11th from Pluto. 1375, Neptune was in the 12th from Pluto. 1387, Neptune was within 10 degrees of the orb of Pluto. And then by 1399, Neptune conjuncts Pluto in the sign of Gemini. Now, the Renaissance era is said to have started around the 1400 to 1600 AD. This heralded the end of the Dark Ages and the burgeoning Enlightenment movement for several reasons. Part of it was the separation of the feudal church state into modern forms of government via the Church of England, Anglicanism, through revolutionaries like Martin Luther and the whole episode of Henry VIII that I'm going to talk about. So it was this time in the last Neptune-Pluto conjunction that the modern age began to emerge from the despondency of the Dark Ages. We see the clashing themes of Neptunian individuation and religion versus Plutonian rule by mob force at play around this very important time in history. Neptunian freedom of spiritual liberty within the individual. We're going to talk about that with Henry VIII, how he wrangled power from the church and give it to the power of the nation at this time. This wrought havoc on the stranglehold of Plutonian power due to the Enlightenment era's contributions of science, physics, modern industry, and sociological movements for the people. There's a lot to swallow there. And it's going to be in the 1500s that we show that going on.
Yeah, because we belittle a bit the implications of the royalty and the church because we don't buy into the power of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all in the science and the media and the framework of how our parents spoke to us because how they were misled and how vice versa. This is just like everything what we base our reality from.
Right. And it's tough because, the government, the king taking power from the church, a lot of people say that wasn't a great thing. I'm in Canada. There's a lot of French in my area, and the French people are kind of about the Catholic Church. They think that the English were wrong of Henry VIII to say that the church has no power over the king. So it's something that, again, spirituality is morally ambiguous. It's one of those things where, Canada has a big, deep history of the English and the French battling each other. It's basically the Catholic Church and English, Anglican, Protestant reformism that was clashing each other at that time in Canada. It's a big part of our history. So what happened around this time is still, no matter how you dice it or slice it, the taking away of power from the church happened at this time. And this is why this is such an important time. And this is why, basically, how I see it is that power in today's time is being taken from the king and being put into the hands of the individual, again, for better or worse. What that means is still tricky for anybody to say. But I think that it is an important step in human evolution.
So a bit like how when the church being back then, an open resource, a bit like a library for those who choose to invest, they could have developed a spiritual sight of the heart, maybe potentially, if you will. However, since that has not been available, there's been a restriction on the consciousness, and yet, as you mentioned, the painter's wet on the reality. If we go back,
right,
and so, and we've got a paintbrush, whether we recognize we've been designated the opportunity to paint with it or not.
That's right. Everybody at every moment is putting their ballot in. They're putting their vote in for how reality wants to be in every moment that they choose, whether they realize it or not.
So yeah, we're creating our own kingdom, whether we're aware of it or not. And
You
at
got
this
it.
stage,
Yep.
that's like where we're developing into how we actually take the reins. It's funny, isn't it?
It's
because that's what a king does. They reign, don't they?
Yep. It's the sovereignty issue, which is a wild thing to talk about. You know, it's not quite my area of expertise, you know.
Well,
like
I tell you this though, really quick, briefly. Like, so we just saw the passing of the monarch here in the UK, right? And
right.
I felt like I'm not a royalist. Like as I say, I could talk about all of the kind of scandals in that area in a long way, but that's just a bit of a distraction in this moment, because if we actually look at how they conduct themselves, as I hanker back to what I said a minute ago, they are simply reflecting and revealing the keys of how sovereignty can be done. If we adorn ourselves with a similar cloak, doesn't mean we have to walk and ponce around with all this regalia and all this type of thing.
Yeah,
but it's about the manner of the state of mind of lordship.
I see. This is why I think if I'm reading you correctly, Philip, this is why I was saying that as a reflector, nobody likes to talk about Capricorn and nobody likes to talk about Saturn as holding power and keeping power and what exactly that means. Because everyone thinks of power as what it's been, which is a king has power over you and you're the small person. But in the world of the burgeoning world of individual sovereignty, we have to learn the lessons of how power has been kept from those who have been doing it all this time. And we've got to start to do it for ourselves.
Exactly. And you said it, like doing it. So they even say, do as I do, not as I say. This is what a kind of statement, in a sense. Like, in a way, it's like, to do as I do, to not to do as I say. It's like, well, they'll say to do certain things, but that's not actually what they do, is it? They don't pay taxes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that, you know, that sort of, that's a tricky thing to deal with in terms of like power being on top of us.
And glamour. It's exactly what we're talking about. Those two very dynamics. It's like, okay, well, I have to see through a whole menagerie of mirrors and hypnotic illusions to be able to even slightly grasp what we're getting at here. And
that's why the interplay of Neptune and Pluto is important in everybody's individual reality, you know, because Pluto is the real power and Neptune is how it's conveyed in a lot of ways.
What you can do, it's a bit like you say, oh, you've got power once you've got the iPhone, but then like, what are you going to do with it? Someone can sit on their power and not use it. Someone can market a whole business and change the world from their iPhone. And someone can just not use it at all and or use it for something meaningless. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and just sort of just peter it away and just kind of allow themselves to be sucked into the power of other people who are on the game.
The same as what we're doing with our own sacral chakra and our conscious and our creative abilities, like we're sleeping on it rather than actually be like what these monarchs do is that and these world sculptors do and these inventors like the Bill Gateses of the world, they're not sleeping on their creative power, they're working every day.
And that's why they're on top right now. And honestly, there's always going to be brighter stars and less bright stars in the new world of individual sovereignty. that's being built on here. But that doesn't mean that different stars can't have the ambition to shine brighter than others, and for other people to regard them as being valuable, and for them to be respected members of society for having the karma and the spiritual capacity to have their inner planets lined up in a way where they can stand out. Just
Yeah,
all
well,
that's going to happen is that they will stand out and have spiritual glory, but what will probably happen is that they will be still sitting at the table with everybody else. No one's going to be a peasant, and no one's going to be a celebrity. You can be a celebrity, but you can't be a king over top of all us other kings and queens and everything in between, right?
totally.
It's an interesting
Totally.
thing to think about.
Is at this stage it might be that they sat down at the table first, but that everybody's got a seat, basically.
Right. Yeah. Cool. I like it, Philip. That's very interesting to think about. Now, what do you say we keep rolling here? Because I want to squish together our whole theme that we've got going here in terms of what's been happening. So we know that in the 1300s, Neptune came to conjunct Pluto again. In the 1400s really is when this started to come through. 1430, Neptune was in the second sign from Pluto. 1453, Neptune exactly sextiled Pluto. So we can see here again, trend number one, Neptune conjuncts Pluto. Trend number two, Neptune sextiles Pluto, and the same thing happens. Pluto moves closer to the sun than Neptune, at which point there is an apparent case of Pluto and Neptune being locked together in their sextile. It was at this point that Columbus discovered the New World, when Pluto was in Scorpio and Neptune was in Capricorn. This is probably like our generation, I think, Philip. I'm born 1991. I think you're born about 1986.
Correct.
So we have this signature too, Pluto and Scorpio and Neptune and Capricorn, which is just interesting to say.
That is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So in 1507, Pluto was in Sagittarius and Neptune was in Aquarius. 1521, Pluto was in Capricorn and Neptune was in Pisces. Now, it was around this time that this is just like around 2005, 2012, when, like I said, in the starting of this period, this is just like the 60s. In 1467, let's say, so again, I gotta put this down this way so that people understand what I mean. Okay. This is here when the sextile was exact. 1453. Let's say Pluto is at 10 degrees of Leo. Neptune is at 10 degrees of Libra. Okay. The next couple of years, let's say when Pluto is at 10 degrees of Virgo, Neptune was at like 6 degrees of Scorpio. Pluto has progressed farther than Neptune because Pluto is closer to the sun, which means Pluto appears to be moving faster than Neptune. Now, let's say in 1479, Pluto is at 10 degrees of Libra. Neptune is at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. Then around here at this time, probably around 1507 to 1493, around here, Pluto starts going out of the Neptune's orbit again, which means Neptune is starting to appear to move faster. So let's say by this point, Pluto is at 10 degrees Sagittarius. Neptune is back up to 6 or 7 degrees Aquarius. Then Pluto's in Capricorn. Neptune is in Pisces. We're going to talk about what Martin Luther did at this time. This time is around the time that Pluto really leaves its proximity to the sun and Neptune appears to move faster. By 1535, this 1535 reflects 2026, 2027. I have to make sure I have my dates exact, but this is around the same sort of time. In fact, it's really 1540 is when Neptune has come. I think that this is basically more along the lines of like 2027. It's when, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm jumping the gun a little bit there. I really am like enthralled and excited for a revolution in consciousness with regards to our position in cosmology. Because when you talk about us being creators with paintbrush, it doesn't just put us like, that's a very different definition to looking at us on a globe and looking at us even on a map, whether it's flat or globe, doesn't really matter. The point is that you're the center. If you're creator, you aren't anything but the center.
Right.
That's exactly it.
And it's amazing. Yeah. If I'm reading your point here, it's around this time. This is so this reflects 2026. It's 1540. And this is around the time that Copernicus releases his theory that the Earth revolves around the sun. So we are all, in the same way that Copernicus is almost pointing at what we're pointing at, which is the sovereignty of the individual through the metaphor of his releasing this at this time. So this is a very significant time in history. I think
because like if you excuse me, someone's drilling, but like my point I want to make regards to their drilling is that if you aren't at the center, then it's this lesson which we're learning, a very personal lesson right now in time about outsourcing and about externalization of wealth and externalization of power. And it's only because of all of this that we've been discussing. And it's because if we're not at the center, then we're following another leader. But yet we're all here to lead ourselves. And that's just what the sovereigns do. They lead themselves.
No kidding. And that's being led by the sun.
If you're led, if you're led, you'll get choked. And this is, I was going to ask you a minute ago, the story of Apollo, like the mythological story of Pluto, which plays the dog, like the dog star or the healing, the unseen thing. It plays it's the bitch of the zodiac.
Right. Like, serious.
It's like, hey, I've been forgotten, trampled on, bedraggled. That the feminine subtle body of it, the subtle energy, that powerful spiritual energy, all of the things which aren't physically manifested, which are actually our muster. It's our might. That's our substance. That's where we came from. And as we want to recreate it, that's where you go back to.
And I guess the Apollo is typically conveyed as the sun and relating to Aries and self-manifestation, if I recall it correctly. So all of these themes relating to the sovereignty and to having our own personal power, the interplay of personal power is a funny thing, because if all the power is all on us, it's nice to have an infrastructure. It's nice to have collective people who are helping us to hold the power so that our knees aren't shaking under the weight of what is required to have a proper human experience. It does take all of us. And we have to... it's okay. We have to wade through how we organize it. And this is how power manifests. But in today's time, it's making it so it's less of the king leading us all. And again, more that we are all in this as a communal.
Yeah, I almost feel like we are, if we reframe from feeling victim to what was a powering structure elite or a smaller power structure of a privy awareness to how we are creators, then actually this redistribution of the wealth of our spiritual power is actually coming of age to the degree that it's actually a reset of the framework. That was only what we could digest at that time. We needed it to be like that. It wasn't that we're victim of it. It's the fact that that framework, that cosmology may have served for that period. But now we've developed our consciousness beyond the squeeze of that to a whole new multitude of the fabrication.
Yep, that's it, Philip. And I want to show like how to the point some of these changes are. So I want to show in this last this next bit of my presentation, we're going to start looking at some very exact repercussions of certain dates. And this especially because I want to start bringing in trend number 3, which is the south and north node eclipse on Pluto in Capricorn or Aquarius. So we've been talking about Pluto going through this thing with Neptune. Trend number 2, where Pluto appears to move faster compared to Neptune. This did occur during the American Revolution in the 1770s, but trend number 1, which is Neptune lapping Pluto, was not occurring then. Having both occur during the 1400s and 1500s, they may have indeed brought about the Renaissance era and the end of the Dark Ages. So now we're going to start observing trend number 3, which is interspersed throughout all of these historical periods. This is more of a short-term phenomenon. Yep, go ahead.
I question you. If we go back one slide, please.
Yep. Okay.
So when we say, like, we don't really know what went on in the Dark Ages, whether there was spiritual conviction, whether there was a trap on information. There could have been actually quite a lot of great things going on then that was actually retold in the Renaissance of who was telling stories.
For sure. Yeah, it's almost like
it's also like, again, like the Renaissance was like, okay, well, now we've got John Dee using astrology. The astrology was been seized and used only by those who are able, rather than it being maybe in the Dark Ages more pagan, more freely available,
right, underground, right? A lot of these alchemical things happened is still in the Dark Ages, but when we are talking about Pluto and Neptune, we're talking about the conveyance of what is collectively accepted.
Okay, so the collective conscious story of what was told.
You got it. You got it. And the thing is that because you're absolutely right that human consciousness has always done all this stuff, but the program, getting with the program is, society accepting and illuminating the nature of what it's been dealing with. So this is the Renaissance era that I'm referring to. And of course, this era was prompted by what happened before. Just like, on your point, Philip, it's important for us all to consider each of these dates that we give. It's always a building up to a climax. For example, when somebody goes through their Saturn return, you as an astrologer, you probably know this. When we do clients for people and they're experiencing their Saturn return, it doesn't all blow up right when Saturn comes conjunct Saturn. There's a build-up period. In fact, I've even found when Saturn is in the 12th house from the natal Saturn, when Saturn is transiting the 12th house from the natal Saturn, that's when things start to get shaky. And then
might be a long time, man.
Right? Yeah, that's it, So it's the whole scope of things, from the 12th house to the 1st house to the 2nd house of Saturn coming past the natal Saturn, that the whole effect of Saturn return occurs. And you look back and you say, wow, look at all this crazy stuff that just happened. It's the same thing with these sorts of, with these long-term archetypes unfolding, is that we see these specific dates where things are happening, but it's always a climax that was already building up. Right?
Sounds good to me. Like it made me reflect on that Saturn through the 12th.
Yeah, for sure.
I've
Right?
got it in the 3rd house, so that's 9 years.
Yeah,
almost.
That's right. Yeah. For your own chart, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But gotcha. Yes. Yeah. So trend number 3 is the next trend I want to start interspersing here. So when the North and South node eclipses occur on Pluto when it's in Capricorn or Aquarius, because Capricorn and Aquarius are signs ruled by the gatekeeper of material world affairs, Saturn. So the first one I want to look at, the beginning of all this. We've already looked at this whole trend of these two going through, their conjunction. And then we've also got this 60s era thing where they were locked into each other. And by 1521, Neptune starts to be released from its tense situation with Pluto, where Pluto leaves Neptune's orbit. And then it's in around this area, Neptune's catching up to the sextile. Neptune is going faster from Earth's perspective in 1535. And this starts in 1521, where Neptune appears to be going faster than Pluto from Earth's perspective. So in 1517, this is around when this started to happen, Martin Luther's 95 Theses was released to churches and the people, around 1517. This is a disputation on the power of indulgences and invitations to debate Catholic dogma. Martin Luther was a huge part of history. The church at the time was considered the intermediary between God and man. And in fact, the church and the papacy, the Pope, they could forgive a bishop, for example, if a bishop went and raped a bunch of little boys or something like that, and the people found out about it. At this time, the Pope could say, now everybody, the bishop is a man of God and he's got lots of money. So if he pays the church, he's helping, the money he gives is helping to feed lots of poor people, which means God will forgive that bishop. This is how people thought at the time. The church was the intermediary between God and man, and they can get away with a bunch of stupid shit. Martin Luther came along and said that only God could judge a man. A wealthy stateholder could not simply buy God's forgiveness. Naturally, he was excommunicated from his home and from the church at this time. But he left some big rippling changes. And I would point everybody to the fact that at this time, 1517, this is when this came out. Martin Luther's 95 Theses. It came out in 1517, where he put this on the church doorstep and he handed it out to a whole bunch of people, and everyone got super riled up about it. This happened when there was an eclipse in Cancer and Pluto was in the sign of a Capricorn, the very beginning of Capricorn. We can see there was a North Node eclipse in Cancer this year. And now this isn't, mind you, for everybody watching, this isn't to say that the paper came out in June. What this means is that this is when the eclipse, June is when the eclipse happened on the South Node. It was on the North Node in Cancer. And that means that the South Node was on Capricorn. So this is a Cancer eclipse on the North Node, while Pluto had the South Node right around the same spot. This is what I'm talking about with trend number 3. When there's a North or South Node eclipse upon the Pluto axis of Capricorn or Aquarius.
So that's releasing deception about the church.
You got
it's also interesting that you got Saturn at the same time, which
that's right.
Just behind in Sag.
It's right there. And this is important to consider as we move along with this. Whenever I would like us to look at where Saturn is, because Saturn is the dispositor of Pluto's energy when Pluto is in Capricorn and when these eclipses are occurring. Okay. So thank you for pointing that out, Philip. You're always very observant, my friend. Now, Pluto in Capricorn, while the North Node eclipses, so let's note that Pluto is in Capricorn, while the North Node eclipse occurs in Cancer. That means that there was a South Node eclipse in Capricorn in that December, and we could show that too. I didn't make a chart for it, but it was really, when we think about it, in December here, I'm going to do this the next time. This is one slide I forgot to put in here, but what I should have put is the December eclipse that would have happened this year, because what would have happened is that the sun and moon would have came together in Capricorn while Pluto was there in Capricorn, and that the South Node was still in Capricorn at the time of the South Node eclipse in December of this year. And this is just like what happened that started the global pandemic in 2020. The South Node was in Capricorn, Pluto was in Capricorn, and there was eclipse in Capricorn. And the same energy that started the global pandemic is the same energy that Martin Luther had the fire in his hand when he gave the beginning of the Protestant Reformation and gave a middle finger to the church.
Well, I've got to say, one of the things that I was harping on about, and have been a little bit here and there, is that actually, well, that eclipse did start and open the pandemic, and it was actually 3 weeks later that we had Saturn in 2020 meet in a conjunction with Pluto on January the 12th. Right. And that's the day that they officially announced the pandemic.
Right.
But I think the pandemic was covert. That was close.
Yeah.
Covert
Yeah.
about with regards to what was actually been going on for a long time, and that's human trafficking in the
Oh, I've heard this. Yeah.
in Japan.
Right.
Because like a lot of companies like Walmart and all these companies, they do a lot of human trafficking from their stocks.
Right.
And that's the bigger thing that's been going on. Rather, they said it was like a released virus in Japan. From what I hear, it's much more like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people and children that get sold out of those dockyards that are dealing with those corporations. And that's a big deception, which is, in a sense, a bit like this guy coming out with his truth about what goes on behind closed doors of the church.
You got it.
Although it's only a rumor of a whisper, like not a lot of people know about it, but a lot of people do. I saw somebody just the other day on
That's
television.
a great correlation, Philip.
I'll just say the last bit is that so
Go ahead.
on television, on like USA, on network in America or something, it was just like a t-shirt in the font of Toys R Us, but it said Chinatown.
Right.
And like, so like, obviously it's sticky, tarry old subject, but this is coming into the collective awareness more so that we can do something about it.
Well, totally, Philip, like that's, buddy, that's so perfect.
Also, like, one more lead on.
Please feel free. You're getting
the
into good stuff here.
The human trafficking isn't just for perversions of sexual nature. It is also coming down to the pineal gland itself, because it is rich in all of us, but especially children. And so we are mined for the crystal consciousness. And that is something that hasn't even been aware that we're carrying a gold mine. That we're not even, like, we're crystal beings. This is something which you and I maybe talk about. Maybe your audience and my audience might explore these things and stuff, but it's not been in these two things aren't in the collective. That's Neptune side of things, and that's the Pluto side of things.
Totally. That's super psychedelic, man. And it's just amazing to me that this was happening at this time in 1517. You're totally right, because the church was doing the same kind of human trafficking thing in its own level, and the power that they had allowed them to just skirt it off. The Neptunian blanket of media at the time was in their hands and in their power. Someone like Martin Luther came along and blew up the curtain and looked behind the green curtain. Go ahead.
One last thing about these things, like another great conjunction of another great example of this is that actually there was an eclipse with Pluto in Capricorn in 1284, in a conjunction with Jupiter, just like what we had in 2020. Because it was the only time since then that we had Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter all together in Capricorn.
Right.
But that one in 1284 was actually that year. In the Notre Dame Cathedral, there was a mural, a stained glass window depicting the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And the Pied Piper of Hamelin isn't just about telling a really bloody good story; it's about kidnapping children.
Right. Wow, dude. I am so thankful that you knew that, because these are the kind of correlations that I'm looking to plug in here. The fact that that happened, and while it was all in Capricorn, fuck, that's why I got you on here, Philip, buddy. That's awesome stuff, dude.
Well, you've been this presentation has been spectacular, I must say. So
thank you
to be a part of it.
Man, feel free to throw your stuff in, buddy. So I'm going to try and dig through and see if I can get us to the guts of all our stuff here, because we're still looking at trend number 3, which is the south and north node eclipses on Pluto while it's in Capricorn and Aquarius. So we know that Martin Luther started his whole thing, and this Martin Luther situation, people see it in history, and it's easy to not think of how big it was, but it led to things like the sacking of Rome. Now, the sacking of Rome was a big situation that happened. The Roman leaders, there was like a lot of excess happening in Rome. Although this was a part of the Italian Renaissance, a lot of people say that this was the end of the Italian Renaissance era. So Martin Luther does his thing in 1517 when there was a north node, south node eclipse on Pluto, which Pluto was in Capricorn. About 10 years later, we see now the north node, this is 1527. The north node is in Capricorn with Pluto, And the solar eclipse happens right where Pluto is standing in Capricorn. This means the North Node is now in Capricorn. This coincides with the Holy Roman Empire. This is when Rome, the Rome itself, is attacked by the Roman Empire. And this, of course, the Pope ruled the papacy of, the papacy and the Vatican of the church they were imprisoned by these sackers, these ransacking, like lots of people were raped. It was kind of a barbarian sort of thing that happened here. But this was part of the growing Protestant movement, which was undercutting the autocratic rule of the Catholic Church ever since Martin Luther started revolts in Germany and the surrounding areas. Martin Luther lit the fire, and then this was a manifestation of the church dismantling its power that it had all throughout the Dark Ages. And of course, it manifested through the sacking of Rome when the North Node was in Capricorn and Pluto was in Capricorn. So it's just amazing synchronicity, yes. So now the next thing, this is a big part of our what we're displaying here. The kingship overthrows the papacy. This is the Vatican is overthrown by King Henry VIII. Now, around the year 1934, the South Node had crept up to Pluto again, this time while Pluto was in the sign of Aquarius. You can see the North Node is in Leo, and the South Node is in Aquarius. You can't see it in Western charts, but it's implied because the North Node and South Node are always opposites. So the South Node is at about 16 degrees. Pluto has just entered Aquarius at this time, just like in today's time. And of course, we see Neptune is at the late degrees of Pisces. So we can see Neptune is catching up to the sextile. So this is almost a very close reflection of today's time. And there's a North Node eclipse on Aquarius. I'm sorry, this is the South Node eclipse. So this is somewhat similar to what's going on in 2027. But in 2027, it's going to be the North Node. So 2027 is more similar to Copernicus discovering his theory of Earth going around the sun, as we're going to kind of describe. So right now, we're looking at 1534. The South Node is in Aquarius. Pluto is in Aquarius. And there is an eclipse this year while the South Node is in Aquarius. This is 1534. Now, around this time, one of the most historically respected kings of England, his name was Henry VIII, although, this is a lot of people say he's the best king to sit on the throne, but by the end of his years, he was a gross sort of loser who was just kind of a weirdo, and he went really bad. But when he was younger, apparently he was less crazy, and he was a supposedly a well-rounded king. I don't know. History isn't as much my strong suit as astrology, but what he did at this time plays an important part of what's going on here. In the midst of the Protestant reformations occurring at this time, which were initiated by Martin Luther, Henry VIII so I'll explain this. Henry VIII had his first wife, and he had a child or two through her, I believe, and she would not give him a male heir. He wanted another king. Now, she wouldn't give him, according to his thought, because this is a very uninformed time, King Henry just threw her away like a used napkin and said, give me another wife. I need somebody who'll give me a male heir. And so the thing is that he was married under the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was still holding power at this time. This is where society and history shifted. King Henry VIII wanted to get a second wife who would give him a male heir, and the church refused to make his first marriage annulled. The church now, King Henry VIII found a second wife, and they basically started doing the dirty, and they started to want to have kids and all this stuff, but the church refused to validate that new marriage. This is where the beginning of the state and the religion began to split in history. to give it short thrift, King Henry said, fuck you to the Catholic Church and said, guess what? Now this is happening. I'm ushering in a new form of power called the divine right of kings, which overthrew the power of the Catholic papacy, giving rise to English Protestantism. This is the kingship of Henry VIII overthrowing the papacy. The Act of Supremacy in 1534, ladies and gentlemen, that's correct. That's when this came out. The Act of Supremacy in 1534, just when the South Node was in Aquarius with Pluto in Aquarius. The Act of Supremacy declared that the king was the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England. The Treasons Act of 1534 made it high treason, punishable by death, to refuse the oath of supremacy acknowledging the king as the only supreme head of affairs in England, not the papacy, not the Catholic Church. This is basically Henry VIII saying, fuck you, Dad. I'm ruling the roost now. England is its own thing, separate from the Catholic Church and the papacy. And I'm the king of my nation now. And if anybody wants to disagree with that, you're getting your fucking head cut off.
And it's funny because that's very symbolic of the story of Saturn and Uranus, because Saturn said, fuck you, Dad.
Right.
And they're in a conjunction here as well, you can see.
Bingo. Good one. Good one, Philip. That's why I got you here, buddy. Because, of course, that's a huge part of this whole dialogue that's going on here. It's interesting that Jupiter is in Capricorn, where it's debilitated, and it's opposite Uranus and Saturn. You know, we always have to correlate these other things. But for our purpose, for our presentation, we have to show that this did happen on the year when the South Node was in the same sign as Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, ruled by Saturn.
So this is and could be an omen for what's coming up with regards to a new spiritual group kind of cutting themselves free from a domineering society view.
I would say so, because of course, even spirituality was being dwindled when the church and the state were married, because the church and spirituality should not, you know, it's just like the story. You're making a good point here, Philip, because it's like the story of Jesus overthrowing the money changers at the temple. He said, stop making my Father's place into a market, because the church was being dwindled by being involved with the corporate marketeering of bureaucracy.
This is like a group of individuals claiming their kinship and overthrowing the state and saying, stop making my paradise a prison.
Right. Yeah, bingo, buddy. Well said. So we can see that this is happening at this time in 1534 when Pluto is in Aquarius and the South Node visits it. We see the strong intermingling of the themes of Neptunian truth and individual sovereignty, moving past Pluto's fixation of power, i.e. the papacy. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, because what happened here is that power went from the church to the kingship and the government monarchy, which, again, it's not exactly sovereignty. And when we move into the new world of individual sovereignty, we're going to have to do what Henry VIII did to the church. It's a difficult thing, but this is the kind of thing that has to happen. And we should really be watching for Uranus's movement while this sort of thing is occurring in today's time. But I have equated more of this stuff to be about Pluto and Neptune, and Uranus, because of its thing, is just so much faster than those two. It's a different form of the clock, but it is important. Now, we're noting trend number 3 here. The eclipses during Pluto's stay in Saturn-ruled Capricorn and Aquarius seems to prompt the biggest turns in the power structures of history. Now, fast forward to 1543. Does this date ring a bell? Of course, this is 1543. I'm not making this up. This is when Copernicus released his theory of heliocentrism. It's 1543. Note that the North Node eclipse of Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius. The
so isn't it funny,
happens.
like
Go ahead.
The,
Yep.
the first few eclipses that you listed of Pluto in Capricorn, they were much more of a different trend
Yep.
to the last couple which you've been listing, which have been Aquarius, which are more like the massive jumps in obviously in consciousness.
Science, in consciousness, illumination.
Whereas these first ones were like the things that imprison us or structure us in the world, the things that can support us in the world,
Yeah.
but they're also deceptive.
And we had to deal with them, right?
Mm.
Now it was in Capricorn, you're dealing with that which is not conducive to your spiritual full enlightenment. In Aquarius, now you're dealing with enlightenment.
Catch up with it. It's like, oh, how can I implement this? Like, I've got
you
this.
Got it. Right. So this, of course, now this time really resonates with what we're going to experience in 2027 and 2028. Because now Pluto is in Aquarius and we're dealing with the North Node in Aquarius. 1543 is the year that Nicholas Copernicus releases his groundbreaking theory of heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun. This caused repercussions into religion that were unheard of until this point. So I'm going to give this short thrift because
I love that sentence though. Like, I just hung like this caused repercussions to religion that were unheard of at this point, because it says in biblical passages, which is a repeat again, but it says that the earth is fixed, terra firma, and the center of creation. And that's very important for our standpoint, because as soon as you're following another leader, that's disempowered everything. It's on wobbly ground. I'm not stable. Everything is just suddenly a bit of a shit show. As soon as you sort of give your power away to an external like that.
And the earth will, the earth shakes when power is transmitted in these heavy ways, especially. So it's so in the 1770s, the Great American Revolution started. And we noticed that, again, trend number one was not apparent because Neptune was not coming close to being conjunct to Pluto. But we can observe trend number 2 and trend number 3 in this period. Trend number 2 is when Pluto comes closer to the sun than Neptune. And it's around the time that Pluto moves from Virgo all the way up to Capricorn. And then whenever Pluto comes into Capricorn, it has just moved past having been closer to the sun than Neptune. So we can see. Say it again.
That's a good stat.
That's right. So that's a good way to just pinpoint what's happening here.
It's almost like we need a reset at that point.
It seems to be the case, right? There's something that happens where Pluto has tension on Neptune, and then Neptune finally breaks free around the time that Pluto comes into Aquarius. It breaks free, and Neptune breaks free from it having been in lockstep with Pluto. Now, the Great American Revolution happened around April of 1775. Now, this is an arbitrary date from around this time. It shows some of the things leading to the Declaration of Independence in 1776. This is American history, right? So we can see some of the things that were happening at the time of the start of the Great American Revolution. The North Node was not yet in lockstep with Pluto at the start of the American Revolution, but this goes to show that even the fact that this eclipse was coming up, things are already changing. Just like in today's time, how lots of things are changing before the eclipse happens in 2027. Now, this is, let's see, this is April of 1775. This is July of 1776. There's a partial solar eclipse in Cancer opposite Pluto. So we can see that it was around this time. I should have used, this is the Declaration of Independence. That's what this is, July 4th, 1776. So in a little bit after this time, there is the eclipse in Cancer while Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn, and the North Node is very close the south node rather is being close to being conjunct Pluto. The Declaration of Independence happened, and then it was around 1777. This is when America started to have its Civil War situation, its Great War, where the loyalists who wanted to stay with Britain versus the revolutionaries who wanted to make an independent state. They came together and sort of blew up. And it was 1777. The eclipses occurred on the axis of Capricorn and Cancer, while Pluto was late in the degrees of Capricorn. You can see the north node is in the end of Cancer, which means the south node is at the end of Capricorn. And remember, this is the south node on Pluto in Capricorn, just like the recent global pandemic. So 1777 was just like, this is when the Great American Revolution War started. And this lasted for about 10 years, right? It lasted until 1785, that area. So 1777, there was a 10-year war that began here when America tried to get away from the womb of its mother, Britain, and it caused great turmoil. There was great war. There was all sorts of terrible, ugly things that were happening, but it was in the spirit of positive spiritual individuation on America's part. And we can see that at this time, Pluto was in the sign of Capricorn, and the south node was conjunct at 27 degrees. The south node was conjunct Pluto at 27 degrees, and sun and moon came together for a south node eclipse on Capricorn. This is just like 2019, December of 2019, when the south node was in Capricorn and Pluto was in Capricorn. And there was another eclipse that happened again. This is December 2019. So this was just, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember you telling me that, buddy. So this was the time when we experienced the beginnings of the global pandemic. It relates to the start of the American Revolution. And I just want to tie this in here, Philip. What happens after that is 10 years later, in 1783, the Great American Revolutionary War ceased with the Treaty of Paris. And finally, it was settled. Britain and Paris and all the nation states out in Europe agreed that America is now an independent state. Nobody has a hand in it. America is its own baby. It's grown up. It's 18 years old. It's left home. It is its own standing nation. This was officially declared the case in 1783 when the North Node happened to come into conjunction with Pluto.
So I want to share something which is now coming to my awareness. So a lot of these things happening before these things, so putting things into alignment, a bit like a game of chess.
Yeah.
And so you could find that actually, for instance, just like the markets changing, the UK bowing out recently of the Brexit, just perfectly in time before the pandemic hit. That was around that time of those eclipses. And so now it's in alignment with the current state of affairs with regards to looking for a new currency and putting that into electronics. And so the big risk, I think, that maybe I don't want to paint like a horrific picture, but like with the short window of time, it's like with this Mars retrograde we're coming into with Gemini, it's like, hey, where do you want to put the technology? Is it a chip you might want to put in your hand to be able to access your banking card or your passport? You'll never lose your banking card and passport again. But that's not naturally organic for us. These types of things are big folds. And so when we come back to these positionings of things, it's a bit like, there's the king is a powerful player because it's the ruler of the economy. The Vatican rules the spiritual information, whereas like Washington rules the
material warfare and resources.
And so I think that there's this, as we're coming into the Pluto, and like it's going to be a bit of a shift. Pluto doesn't stay in Aquarius until the end of November 2024, because it goes back into Capricorn.
It'll dance on the line for a bit.
So there's a bit of a beauty in this
Mhm.
changing of templates. The fact that it needs to go back is a good thing. And the fact that we've got this ushering in, if you will, of change, because what we're looking at is these two sides of things with regards to this spiritual break-free potential group, or these groups, these sovereign groups breaking free and doing their own thing, not stuck to their own, not islands to their own potentially. But also this we want to consolidate our losses with the people, and yet we've still got most of the people as a resource. But then this is a minor thing. I think this is the short-term window, because I think that this will flummox this consolidation, this manipulation, this old technology pressure thing, because I think that what they're going to have is the reincorporation of spirituality into the hub, into the main frontier of humanity. And so any outskirt revolution on the parameter, seemingly, not maybe geographically, but certainly through the eyes of acceptance of conformity on the society levels of spiritual breakthrough, they will have to be incorporated in, because that's how you make a cake that's valuable. Everything that's on the outskirts or on the parameter of society has to be dragged back in. That's just how you make bread, baby.
Yeah.
That's just how it works.
Cool. Totally. And it's a spooky thing, the whole hand and the chip thing, like, because in today's time, the people in power are probably well versed in what you and I are talking about right now with these trends, and they're aware that you and I are people like you and I are getting this information out to the masses, where the people can start to realize that doing the chip in the hand thing has significations of the power play of the chess move of the people who have been in power all this time. So it's important for us all to be aware of what is coming in the future, especially because it's important to consider that, at this point in American history, February 8th, 1785, the North Node eclipse occurred in Pluto, in Aquarius, where Pluto was. And this was the end of the American Revolution. And Saturn was in Capricorn. Saturn likes being in Capricorn. It's in its own sign. There's support for America leaving the ugly things that were happening around this time. Whenever Pluto is in Aquarius, Saturn's position is important, because whatever is happening with Saturn is going to show the tenacity of the gatekeeper, because Aquarius was ruled by Saturn, and the North Node is intensifying Pluto's energy through Aquarius, through Saturn, which means if Saturn is strong, there are significations of it being having the strength to carry through the mission that Pluto is trying to send through Saturn. And this was good for the people. This was a good statement of individuation on the part of America, getting out of the hands of Britain and being an individualized state. It's, again, spirituality is morally ambiguous, because now the states is its own governmental, monarchical, power-hungry government of sorts. I'd like to point out, actually, Philip, that it's interesting that in 1785, while Pluto was in Aquarius and the North Node eclipses were occurring there, this year in 1785, U.S. Congress announced unanimously to resolve the U.S. currency to the dollar, and it adopted a decimal coinage for the first time. So the concept of money turning into something new happened around this time while Pluto was in Aquarius, but it was when Saturn was in a good sign. And this is why I'm pointing to, again, today's time. We see this is the 1800s. Neptune came through again. Then in the 60s, they were in the lockstep where Pluto was closer to the sun. This led us to 26, when Neptune was exactly sextile Pluto. That's when it's going to be. And now Neptune is going faster from Earth's perspective. Now, Uranus, of course, has a very different sort of thing. We can see Uranus was conjunct Pluto in 1851. Then Uranus was trine Pluto in 1885. Uranus was opposite Pluto in 1903. Uranus was in a balsamic trine in the ninth house from Pluto in 1922.
I
Uranus
was
can, yep, yep.
I really lingered on your decimal. Really, excuse me, like for a moment, because when like they did that shift of the currency, it's a bit like a ducat, or even a bit like a morsel of bread. Have
Right.
that.
You
Really, is
mean
that you can't play with this. This is what we're working with, in a sense, because you haven't taken your own lordship, your own kinship. You can have
you're
this
using
ducat.
our money? Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
Britain. They were using Britain's money, which means it wasn't their own name wasn't on the bills that they were using. So once your own American dollar bill is produced or coinage or whatever, that is a statement of this individuation, which could mean like, maybe like Bitcoin or, whatever is going to happen for the individual sovereignty. It's going to be out of the hands of government.
yeah. Well, they have to do a blanket illusion, I think, of for instance, I don't know what they could say. It's like, well, if we go to war, for instance, with the people who provide energy, then what we'll do is we'll wipe your debt and we'll give you this new economy with this new technology. And then you can have everything that you want delivered to your houses. This war will be over and like that, So, but the reason that can be like it's a scare tactic. And so it's a control tactic, and it's the war is just a problem reaction solution so they can get to the next economy, which is like your home being things delivered to. If you go out the house, you've got a chip, and that's it. And so that's becoming either you use, and also these other economies with regards to the Bitcoin and things. I don't really know how they're working, but there are different ways that you can work beyond having the chip, I imagine. It's like these other economies. But if you want to go to the cinema, if you want to go to the sporting game, if you want to go to the collective grouping,
you gotta have the chip.
And this is not something. The fact is, like from what we've seen on our journeys, all I can speak for is myself. But it seems like when these things get predicted, they happen. It's just about how we choose to respond and diversify our choice making.
Right. And that's why
There will be
talking
people who
about it is
choose that.
important.
There will be people who choose that. But it clearly doesn't have to be a choice. There are alternatives.
And this is the conversation that's going to be unfolding in the coming time, I think. People like us are prompting it, Philip. So I want to get through the last of our presentation because then we can kind of roll for a little bit. We can see here that Uranus has, like I said, Uranus goes much faster than Pluto and Neptune. Uranus came conjunct with Pluto in 1965. Then in 1993, Uranus was conjunct Neptune in Capricorn. In 2012, Uranus was square to Pluto. And then eventually in 2023, Uranus is trine Pluto and sextile Neptune. And of course, this is going to be a big change. These are all in feminine signs in 2023. Then in 2025, they are all going to tip over into masculine signs at the same time. The implications of this are ginormous in their own right. And it's interesting, really, that at the same time in 2025, all these three outer planets are in this kite formation, at least the base of a kite. There's nothing here in Libra, but whenever something goes into Libra at this time, it's going to have big implications for whatever goes through there, whether it's Saturn,
That's going to be
Jupiter,
regular, isn't it? Like obviously the moon every month and like all the other planets.
Sun, when the sun is in the beginning of Libra at that time, it's going to have huge ramifications for all things considered. Now, we've talked about the solar eclipses in 2019. The South Node eclipse was on Pluto. That's, of course, what started the pandemic. Now, this was in 2020 and 2019. What I would like to point out is that, of course, Saturn was in Capricorn at this time, which means Saturn was conjunct Jupiter, which gives a bit of help to Saturn. Even though the global pandemic was a really bad, messed up thing, there are significations of Saturn having been in an okay place. Now, when we fast forward 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, the North Node is in Pisces with Neptune, which, by the way, 2025 and 2026 are going to have some very interesting spiritual implications because the North Node is going to be on Neptune while it's in the sextile to the other outer planets. And then 2026 actually is when Saturn comes into Aries. And finally, in 2027, all of the planets will be officially in the realm of the masculine signs. Saturn is going to not only be in Aries where it's debilitated, but it's also going to be with Neptune. And it's going to be with Neptune in Aries, the sign of its debilitation. It's going to be amplified in its debilitation sign while the North Node eclipse is happening on Pluto in Aquarius.
Well, I do feel like the certain cool to say this as with regards to this reflection. Like,
yeah.
So all of this shift into masculine energy, and the sign of assertion, Aries, the first sign, is something which has been like with Chiron since 2018, and it's actually, I think, 2026. So it's almost like we've developed the ability to assert a self, and the image of self, and how we see what is self, and all of these different contextual ideas. What even is an idea is shifted into a dynamic which is healed. It's like, I'm not apprehended anymore. I know how to put myself out there.
Totally. Like that Aries Neptune is going to be an important part of the individuation within the collectivism of Pluto and Aquarius. There's so much to be talked about just in all these planets coming into the masculine signs in their own right, right? So I might even want to just at some point, we could just hang out, and talk about just the fact that these planets are coming into these masculine signs at the same time. But what I wanted to point out is all these long-standing things happening, and they're converging just at the same time that the short sphere is happening, where in 2027, the North Node is going to be on Pluto and Aquarius. Neptune is going to be bursting out of its locking hold from Pluto having gone close to the sun. And Saturn is going to be in Aries. And of course, in February 2028, the North Node is going to be even closer to Pluto on the solar eclipse that occurs at this time. And Saturn's going to be in Aries, conjunct Neptune, no less, which means the amplification of Saturn in Aries. What I would say is that by my reckoning, this would be a very important time for everybody to start dealing with all things Saturnian, to embrace Saturn, and to see the constriction that's happening in the light of some kind of proper evolutionary spirit. Everyone hated what was happening in the global pandemic, but some things happened at that time because there was bursting of potentials that hadn't been consolidated.
Do you mean like we're preparing ourselves for mummy and daddy government not being there for us?
At some level, it's what it seems like to me.
And we actually don't recognize how dependent we are on them.
Yes.
Because obviously it means water, electricity, internet. That's just the first three. It's just a moment.
And how friggin' screwed would we be without those things? But they're in the hands of the plutocracy.
But we'll also be really great without them too. Like we can survive and thrive without them, and we can have a massive development in learning how we can support ourselves that allow us to advance beyond maybe what was actually this could be seemingly luxury, very nice, but actually we could probably develop ourselves beyond that.
Right. That's right. And that's why I wanted to point to this time as being a very vulnerable time. The Leo rising in me wants to kind of, hey, everybody, let's just pay attention to what's going on here. But of course, as the years progress, Saturn's going to leave Aries. It's going to get back on its feet. And we can expect that much more positive things are going to happen once Saturn eventually goes closer to Libra. And even when it goes into Taurus, Saturn's much happier in Taurus than it is in Aries. It's going to get out of the Neptune sign, when Saturn's in Gemini at this, like that'll be about 2030 area. Saturn is going to be moving in lockstep with Uranus. and there's going to be perturbations of everything that gets laid out in this important period. 2026, 2027, 2028. The paint is going to be very wet. And we at this time are going to have shaky legs because Saturn needs to go through Aries, and it needs to go through it while Neptune is there.
I see, like, I kind of repainted that picture of like the break-free societies and things. This is still that. This is the birth of these things being able to stand on our 2 feet.
Right.
But also then I think that by the time Saturn does sweep all the way through to Gemini and meets with Uranus, this is the reincorporation of this new spiritual economy, as well as like the recognition that on the other side of the coin is the transhumanism, there is the conformism. And so it's like, how do we work with this alchemistic blend? And because we can even recognize that even technology can be sentient, and even that once we can show it love, and it can show us back love once we practice that. That's something which is that's our responsibility to commandeer.
For sure. And it's a huge responsibility, especially in times like this, because what I think is going to happen is that it's true that we are getting kicked out of the house. We say to mom and dad, government, listen, I've had enough. And the government's going to say, oh, you spoiled little piece of shit, get out of the fucking door then. And we're going to get kicked out of the house with no power structures. You nailed that, Philip, buddy. You've got such a good, clear sight. What's going to happen at this time is that we are going to have an illusory time, a difficult, delusory time, while Saturn is with Neptune in Aries. It's going to be like, not only are we suffering by being alone, but it's like we got into drugs, or we got into something in the street that has clouded our clarity. Anything can happen.
For instance, out there in that makes it a little bit less, that makes it a little bit optimism as well. Like, for instance, it's the 8 to 9 people pointing at us as individuals who are still grouped together in certain ways, for having the ghoul to teach our kids a different way, to having the guts to stand alone and to go into a different walk of life that we feel is organic for us. To be a bit like the individuals who chose to do the non-conformist things in the pandemic. That was almost like a test run.
For sure. And it needs to happen because the nodal eclipses are happening in Aquarius while Pluto is there. Everybody wants to start developing on an enlightenment phase. We all feel it. It's just that it's almost like we've all been talking about, like, you know, those ice plunges, you know, it's like everybody jumps in and it's really good for you. They say that there's a million things good for you. We've all been talking about it, and you know, we've been talking for the whole trip up here. It's going to just be something. It's going to be something when we dive in there. But when we dive in there, we're all going to be like, oh, this is a lot. But we're doing it to clean ourselves out, to purge ourselves, and for the optimistic intent of getting past the difficulty that this is going to sail on our nervous systems while this is happening. And this is why, you know, this happens when kids leave home. It can be a little bit tough at first, but there's freedom in it. There's a reason why we wanted to leave home. Our parents have been repressive, and it's time for humanity to look optimistically.
What happens when you leave home? They welcome you back. They will welcome us back, but we need to make a success of ourselves first before we dare.
We need to be the prodigal son.
That returns having made an accomplished self, who doesn't need to return, but is doing it because
we love them. That's nailed it, Philip, buddy. You're such a perfect guy for me to have had this conversation with. Likewise. Now, Philip, I think that we've been at this for some time now, my friend. So I'm glad that we got to make these optimistic and truly, you know, this is the era that we're moving into, and I think that this is the attitude that we have towards it. It's like go ahead.
Very beautifully, though, we're on the precipice of consciousness in this conversation, and astrology as well, and we do it under a Venus-Sun's closing square to Pluto, which I think is like it's breaking free from the shackles of old perspectives and old belief systems, and opening up to the depths of that which you and I haven't even rendered, because we're just present, witnessing.
For sure. There's so much there, and I invite everybody on my own channel as well as on Philip's channel to leave your comments, discuss, feel free to make video commentaries and video responses. Let us know what you feel about everything that we've talked about. I would love to know what everybody thinks about my particular shtick that I'm laying down with all these different trends, but also what Philip has so insightfully laid out about his always eternally optimistic and realistic at the same time perspective on how we can take the light consciousness of our eternal intelligence and turn the wet paint into the picture that we want it to be. Everybody feel free to say a word about it, because me and Philip would love to hear it.
Yeah, thank you all for your contributions, and thank you, Justin, so much for putting the hard work and making that presentation. That was absolutely elite. Obviously, it's a guiding line, but those things, they take a lot of work, and they help the consciousness to stream through. So thank you so much for putting the effort in and inviting me and holding the space for this presentation.
Always my pleasure, Philip, buddy. I love hanging out with you, and I look forward to more convergences with you. And I also look forward to what you've got going on. You've got a little bit of a thing happening in December. I'm going to see if I can be there for it as a presenter, but if I can't, I'd love to I love everything that you do, so I can't wait. And if anybody's interested, feel free to watch Philip, because he's got a little conference happening in December of 2022.
Yeah, I put a 3-day event on in Tulum, Mexico in January, and I'm excited to do another one in the very middle of December. So we'll see about that. So we'll keep some confirmations in the coming weeks, keep your ears peeled. But also, if anybody's interested, I'm doing like webinars for this time, major transits that we're living through every 2 weeks. But you can find links for that via my channel, and I'll give you my link tree. That's all right.
Awesome. That's perfect. And then I'll put in the description of my own video.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Philip. It's always a nice pleasure talking with you, buddy. So I'm going to press stop, and then we'll say a final goodbye. And then I've got to split. I got to go to band practice. I'm already a little late, but that's okay. Thanks for watching, everybody. Keep your eyes in the skies, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheerio.